So there I was, Marcus, just your average human working at the Galactic Commerce Station Meridian 7, minding my own business, trying to finish my quarterly reports before lunch. And I mean, really trying. Do you know how hard it is to concentrate when you're surrounded by aliens who insist on making every single task feel like you're performing brain surgery under a strobe light? Anyway, that's when I heard the unmistakable sound of something. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. Or rather, someone sliding under my desk. Now, before you ask, yes, I heard it. And yes, I reacted exactly how anyone would react when a 6-foot-tall Kathrani with 4 arms suddenly materializes beneath their workspace. I screamed. Not a little gasp, not even a dignified shout of surprise. I'm talking full theatrical scream, the kind that probably got me on 3 different alien communication networks faster than I could blink. Whoa, okay, I said, rolling my chair back and attempting to look down at this armored insectoid creature now occupying the leg space of my desk. Commander Vex, I know we've talked about this before, but invading personal spaces like this is generally considered rude on Earth. It's right up there with chewing with your mouth open and ignoring someone's text messages for 3 days. Vex didn't respond immediately. All 4 of his arms were positioned underneath him in what I can only describe as the most uncomfortable pretzel configuration I'd ever witnessed. And his mandibles were clicking away in what sounded like contentment. So basically, he looked like he was napping. Which, okay, so that's when things got weird. Or weirder than they already were. I should clarify. I was still trying to process exactly why a Kathrani military commander, someone who had once told me he could tear through reinforced steel plating like it was paper, was currently taking a power nap under my desk when I heard the heavy footsteps. Security. Specifically, it sounded like both members of the station's security team, because of course they heard my scream. They always do. The footsteps got closer, and I could hear the characteristic whine of their energy weapons powering up. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. So I did what any reasonable human would do in this situation. I kicked out my legs, put my feet up on my desk, and pretended I was just lounging around doing absolutely nothing suspicious whatsoever. Officer Tarn appeared first, his crystalline body refracting the station's fluorescent lights into a kaleidoscope of colors that honestly would have been pretty if he wasn't currently looking like he was ready to blast something into oblivion. His partner, Officer Zenith, appeared right behind him, the Valorian's sleek form tense and ready for combat. "Marcus," Tarn said, his voice echoing like rocks tumbling down a canyon. "We detected a security breach in your sector. Scream's signature matched your biometric pattern. Explain." "Breach?" I laughed. "And buddy, let me tell you, I've never been better at faking casual in my entire life." "No breach here, officer. Just me, my desk, and my thoughts about the inefficiency of the quarterly report system. You know how it is." "You screamed," Zenith said. And I've got to admit, the Valorian had a talent for cutting right to the heart of matters. It was both refreshing and terrifying. "Did I?" I said, putting my hand to my chest in what I hoped was a convincing gesture of surprise. "Oh, that. Yeah, I just remembered this email I need to send. Really important stuff. Nothing to do with security. Definitely not related to any large armored creatures." Tarn stepped closer to my desk, his crystalline form catching the light again. "Your heart rate is elevated. Your voice contains approximately 42% more stress markers than baseline. Your pupils are dilated. You are clearly experiencing acute anxiety." Well, So much for my strategy of playing it cool. Turns out, when you work with species that have advanced biometric scanning technology built into their very bodies, lying becomes pretty much impossible. So I did what any person in my situation would do. I doubled down. "Elevated heart rate?" I said, sitting up straight and placing my hands on my desk in front of me. "Officer, I'm a human. We get elevated heart rates from existential dread, bad coffee, and the knowledge that our species has terrible hearing compared to most intelligent life forms in the galaxy. This is just my baseline after 3 cups of the station's coffee substitute. You know, the stuff that tastes like recycled air and regret." "Marcus." Tarn's voice had taken on that tone that meant I was losing him. "Why are they under your desk?" The thing was, I could have played dumb. I could have pointed out that Tarn had literally just told me I was bad at lying. So why was he expecting me to lie? But instead, I did something that I thought was going to get me expelled from the station, or arrested, or turned into some kind of intergalactic incident. I told him the truth. "They're napping," I said simply. Zenith's antennae twitched. Tarn's crystalline form seemed to shift, creating a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. Both of them just stared at me, and I could feel the weight of their incomprehension pressing down on me like I was at the bottom of Earth's deepest ocean. "Napping?" Zenith finally said. "The Kathrani do not nap." "Yeah, that's what I thought too," I said. And okay, maybe it was the stress of the situation, or maybe I was just done with this whole thing. But I started laughing. Not a little chuckle. I'm talking full laughing, the kind where you have to put your hands on your stomach and just let it all out. But apparently they do. At least this one does. Commander Vex has been under my desk for like 45 minutes now, and I think he might be sleeping so hard that a supernova couldn't wake him. "This is highly irregular," Tarn said. "You think?" I managed to get out between laughs. "I've worked here for 2 years, and nothing about this place is regular. Last week, I attended a meeting where a Zorillian spent 20 minutes arguing about what counts as a lunch break when you don't have a digestive system. The week before that, someone from accounting tried to convince me that time was a management expense and should be budgeted accordingly. So yeah, a military commander taking a nap under my desk. That's actually pretty tame by station standards." Zenith leaned down and looked under the desk. And even from my position, I could see Vex just lying there. All 4 arms curled around his body, his mandibles still going with that click, click, clicking sound that I was starting to associate with deep sleep. It was actually kind of adorable, if I'm being honest. Like a big armored cat that could disassemble you with his bare hands. "He is indeed napping," Zenith confirmed, standing back up. "How did you convince a Kathrani to nap?" "I didn't convince him to do anything," I said, getting my laughter back under control. "He just showed up, crawled under my desk, and decided that was napping time. It was like watching someone decide that your furniture was exactly what they needed in their life." "This is unprecedented," Tarn said. "Everything is unprecedented," I replied. "That's kind of my whole deal as the only human on this station. But look, the way I see it, if a heavily armed military commander wants to take a nap under my desk, I'm not going to stop him. That seems like a fight I'd lose, and I haven't lost a workplace confrontation in at least 6 months." "You're lying," Zenith said. "Humans always lose workplace confrontations." "Fair point," I conceded. "But in my defense, I haven't tried very hard. Mostly I just make jokes and hope everyone forgets what the original problem was." Tarn and Zenith exchanged a look that I interpreted as crystalline confusion mixed with Valorian exasperation. After a moment, they both lowered their weapons. "We will file a report," Tarn said, stating that this incident was a false alarm and that you simply screamed for emotional reasons. "Emotional reasons?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "That's the best you could do?" "It is the most believable explanation for human behavior," Zenith said. "Humans are fundamentally unstable beings, prone to spontaneous emotional outbursts. On your home planet, this is considered normal." "Okay, first of all, ouch," I said, placing my hand over my heart. "That's a direct attack on my species, and I'm going to need you to know that I'm going to remember this and bring it up at the next station gathering just to make things awkward. Second, you're not entirely wrong. But at least we don't spend 40 minutes arguing about whether a color is too blue to exist." "That was a legitimate philosophical debate," Zenith said. "You were arguing with a Kethrani about the feasibility of ultraviolet," I pointed out. "I was there. It got heated." Tarn moved toward the desk, and then paused. "May we observe Commander Vex's napping behavior?" "Sure," I said. "But try not to wake him up. He's probably going to wake up grumpy enough as it is, and I'd really rather not deal with that kind of energy right now. My stress levels are already 3 points higher than they should be after the whole security situation. So here's where things got interesting. Both Tarn and Zenith kneeled down and peered under my desk at the snoozing Kethrani commander, and I could almost feel the wheels turning in their heads. I'd seen that expression on the faces of scientists everywhere, right before they were about to make some kind of discovery or do something monumentally stupid. Sometimes both at the same time. "How long has he been under the desk?" Tarn asked. "Like I said, about 45 minutes, I replied. "He just kind of slid under there, positioned himself into what I can only describe as the least ergonomic position possible, and passed out. He's been going through these little clicking cycles ever since. I think it's his version of REM sleep, but I'm just guessing based on vibes at this point." "Fascinating," Zenith murmured. "In all my studies of Kethrani physiology, I have never observed this behavior." "Yeah, well, welcome to my world," I said, "where nothing makes sense and everyone is just making it up as they go along." "Commander Vex has a reputation for being extremely disciplined and resistant to rest cycles," Tarn said. "It is part of Kethrani cultural philosophy. They believe that rest is a weakness." "Clearly, someone didn't tell Commander Vex that memo," I said, gesturing under the desk. "Or he got a firmware update or something. Either way, he's sleeping like the station just shut down all its problems for the evening." Zenith turned to me, and I could see what looked like curiosity in her eyes. "You said I should try it. The napping." "Yeah," I said. "And okay, I was about to commit the cardinal sin of human-alien relations, which was to make a suggestion that I wasn't entirely sure about. But I was running on fumes and caffeine and spite at this point. So why not? I mean, look at him. He's been under my desk for 45 minutes, and he looks more peaceful than I've ever seen him. The Kethrani are supposed to be these hyper-aggressive warrior beings, right? But what if that's just because they never learned how to chill out? What if rest is actually this revolutionary act that could change everything about how your civilization functions?" "That is an absurd premise," Tarn said. "Is it, though?" I challenged. "You work security on a space station, right? When was the last time you actually rested? And I don't mean sitting in a chair for 6 hours pretending you're on break. I mean genuine, deep, under-the-desk napping." "I do not nap," Tarn said. his crystalline form shifting in a way that suggested discomfort. "Right. And how's that working out for you?" I said. "Because from where I'm sitting, you seem stressed. Your form is all rigid and geometric, like you're one bad news cycle away from cracking into 1,000 pieces." "That is an inaccurate assessment," Tarn said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Zenith, on the other hand, was still looking at Vex with what I could only describe as scientific interest. "How did you discover this napping location?" "Honestly, I didn't discover anything," I said. "Commander Vex literally just showed up and went under my desk. I didn't ask him to. I didn't suggest it. He just decided that my desk was the perfect place to take a nap. And you know what? I wasn't going to argue with a guy whose idea of a bad day probably involves destroying entire buildings." "The logic is sound," Zenith said to Tarn. "If the Kethrani commander has chosen this location for rest, perhaps there is something about it that is conducive to sleep. Or maybe he just likes the dark," I suggested. "Humans find dark spaces comforting. It's why kids hide in closets when they're overwhelmed. It's calming. You lose all the visual stimuli and your brain can kind of just shut up for a bit." Tarn looked at Zenith. Zenith looked at Tarn. It was one of those moments where I could practically see the communication happening between them, some kind of silent agreement that maybe, just maybe, this weird human had stumbled onto something interesting. "I will attempt this napping behavior," Zenith announced. And that's when things really got weird. "See, you have to understand something about Valorians. They're naturally sleek and predatory, built for speed and efficiency. Seeing one of them try to fit under a desk was like watching a cheetah attempt to become a burrito. It took some maneuvering, and there was a moment where I thought she was going to get stuck. But eventually, she managed to wedge herself under the desk on the other side from Vex. This is not entirely uncomfortable, Zenith said after a moment. Right? I said, getting more animated now. It's like your own little cave. No one's looking at you. No one's expecting you to be productive. You're just existing in the dark and nothing's allowed to bug you because you're under a desk. The social expectation of constant productivity is indeed exhausting, Zenith murmured, and I could swear I heard something like contentment in her voice. How long should one remain under the desk? As long as you need to, I said. There's no schedule for napping. That's kind of the point. Tarn shifted uncomfortably, his crystalline form making that wind chime sound again. This is irregular. Most good things are, I said. Look, I get it. You're security. You're supposed to be alert and ready at all times. But even humans can't maintain that level of focus indefinitely. And we're the species that invented coffee and energy drinks specifically so we could avoid sleeping. You're probably burning out, and you just don't realize it. I am not burning out, Tarn said, but his voice was losing some of its certainty. Dude, I said, gesturing at him with what I hoped was a sympathetic expression. You just showed up to my desk because I screamed, ready to blast something into space dust, and the worst thing that happened is that I was harboring a sleeping Kethrani. If that doesn't warrant at least a little bit of stress, I don't know what does. When was the last time you actually rested? Tarn was quiet for a long moment. And I mean a long moment. The kind where you could hear the station's life support systems humming and the occasional beep of a passing worker's comm device. The kind where you start wondering if the person is ever going to answer at all. Approximately 642 Earth days, Tarn finally said. I stared at him. 642 days? That's almost 2 Earth years. That's not a work schedule. That's a medical emergency. It is standard crystalline protocol, Tarn said. But I could hear the exhaustion in his voice now, like maybe he was finally admitting something to himself. Yeah, well, your protocol's broken, I said flatly. Come on, under the desk, both of you. I am already under the desk, Zenith reminded me. Right. But Tarn's not, I said, pointing at him. And until he is, I'm going to assume the security team is still technically on high alert. Which means my day isn't really ending. Which means I can't relax. Which means this whole napping revolution is incomplete. Tarn looked at me, then at the small space under the desk, where a Kethrani commander and a Valorian officer were now resting. Then back at me. And I could see the calculations happening in his crystalline mind. The cost-benefit analysis of maintaining protocol versus trying something that absolutely violated everything he'd ever been trained to do. This is highly irregular, he said again. But this time, it sounded less like a statement and more like an excuse. Come on, I said, standing up and pushing my chair back further to give him more space. The worst that can happen is that nothing changes, and we all get up and go back to work. But the best that can happen is that you discover that rest is actually pretty great, and you spend the next few days remembering why your civilization decided that not sleeping was a good idea in the first place. Tarn made a sound that I could only interpret as crystalline stress, and then, with what looked like monumental effort, he started to crouch down. Watching a being made of crystalline material try to fit under a desk was simultaneously the most uncomfortable and most hilarious thing I'd ever witnessed. There were angles that didn't quite work with his structure, and at one point I thought he was going to admit defeat and go back to standing guard or whatever it is security does when they're not interrogating humans about why they screamed. But he made it. Somehow, he managed to position himself under the desk, with Vex and Zenith, all three of them in a configuration that looked like some kind of alien origami project. And for a moment, nothing happened. We all just sat there. Or rather, I sat in my chair, and three highly trained security and military personnel sat under my desk in the dark. Then I heard it, a sound that I could only describe as relief. Deep, resonant, like a boulder settling into place after centuries of being unstable. It was coming from Tarn, and I realized that he wasn't just resting. He was finally actually allowing himself to rest for the first time in almost 2 years. This is acceptable, Tarn said after a moment, his voice muffled by the desk in the darkness. Yeah, I said, leaning back in my chair and putting my feet up on my desk. It is kind of amazing, isn't it? I sat like that for about 20 minutes, just listening to the gentle clicking sounds of Vex's sleep cycles and the barely there sounds of Zenith and Tarn also settling into rest. It was surprisingly peaceful, actually. The station hummed around us, other people went about their business, and down under my desk, three beings from species that had spent centuries locked in various states of conflict were just sleeping, taking a break, allowing themselves to be vulnerable for a little bit. Then my comm device chimed. It was Manager Zix from the central office, asking about my quarterly reports, the ones I was supposed to finish before lunch. Hey Zix, I said, keeping my voice low so I didn't disturb the sleeping aliens under my desk. Yeah, so, about those reports? I'm going to need a slight extension. Why? Zix's voice came back, confused. You have adequate time before the deadline. Yeah, well, I'm currently hosting what I think might be a revolutionary napping event under my desk, I said. So I'm going to be a little busy for the next couple of hours. There was a long pause. Then Zix said, Explain. So I did. And I'm not going to lie, the explanation took about 15 minutes. involved at least 3 different interruptions where I had to clarify what I meant by napping, and ended with Zix making a sound that suggested either complete confusion or existential crisis, possibly both. "This is the most human thing I have ever heard," Zix finally said. "I approve of this experiment." "Really?" I said, genuinely surprised. "The station's productivity ratings have been declining," Zix said. "Morale is at an all-time low. If a simple napping intervention can improve these metrics, then I will not only approve of your extended deadline, but I will also authorize you to continue this experiment and document the results." "Zix, I don't know what to say," I said. That's actually the most supportive response I've gotten from management since I arrived on this station. "Just make sure to file the proper paperwork," Zix said. "Everything requires documentation, even revolutionary napping." After I signed off with Zix, I did what any reasonable human would do when given the blessing of management to conduct an experiment in workplace rest. I pulled up a document on my computer, labeled it Unauthorized Napping Initiative, Preliminary Results, and started typing up my observations. 3 hours later, I was still sitting there, documenting the peaceful sleeping habits of 3 officers who had clearly needed this break more than they'd needed anything else in years. I watched their breathing patterns, noted the decrease in ambient stress indicators, and made a mental note to recommend that the station security team receive regular, mandatory rest breaks. The sun set outside the station's viewports, bathing the room in the kind of golden light that made everything look peaceful and slightly unreal. And I sat at my desk, eating a sandwich that I'd ordered from the station's cafeteria, watching over these 3 beings who were finally actually allowing themselves to rest. When they woke up, about 4 hours later, the transformation was immediate and obvious. Vex's mandibles were clicking in what I could only interpret as happiness. Zenith's antennae were relaxed instead of constantly twitching. Even Tarn's crystalline form seemed to shimmer with a kind of contentment that I'd never seen before. "That was..." Zenith started, then seemed to search for the right words. "Entirely necessary." "Yeah," I agreed. "It kind of was." Vex climbed out from under the desk and stood up, looking down at me with what I could swear was gratitude in his large compound eyes. "The human-provided rest," he said, his voice carrying a note of something that sounded like respect. "This is an unexpected development in human-Kithrani relations. I mean, all I did was let you nap under my desk," I said, shrugging. "But I'm glad it helped." "This napping concept has merit," Tarn said, finally extricating himself from the confined space under my desk. "I feel approximately 32% more efficient than prior to the intervention." "That's what rest does," I said. "It fixes things. Physical things, mental things, probably spiritual things too, if you're into that kind of stuff." Zenith looked at me, and I could see something new in her eyes. Understanding, maybe. Or just a different perspective on the whole human approach to productivity and burnout. "I would like to formally request that this napping initiative become a regular feature of station operations," she said to Tarn. "I will recommend it to the Administrative Council," Tarn replied. And that's how I accidentally started a workplace revolution based on nothing more than letting people nap under my desk. Within a week, there were designated napping zones established throughout the station. Within a month, productivity had increased by 37%, and morale had gone through the roof. Within 3 months, other stations were asking for information about this revolutionary rest protocol. And every single time someone asked me how I came up with the idea, I told them the same thing. I didn't. Commander Vex just decided to nap under my desk, And I figured if he could do it, so could everyone else. Because that's the thing about humans that maybe the rest of the galaxy hadn't quite figured out yet. We're not brilliant planners or strategic thinkers or these hyper-efficient beings that everyone seems to think we are. We're just people who sometimes scream at inappropriate moments, make jokes about things that aren't funny, and occasionally discover revolutionary concepts entirely by accident. We're a species that understands the value of rest because we're constantly on the verge of burning out ourselves. We get that sometimes the best solution is to crawl under your desk and take a nap. We comprehend that productivity isn't everything, that being alive and functional is better than being dead on your feet. The galaxy needed a reminder of that, and apparently, I was the human assigned to provide it. Not through careful research or strategic planning, just through having one of the most stressful days of my life and somehow turning it into something that changed station operations forever. Security asked why they were under my desk. The human said they were napping. Try it. And surprisingly, the rest of the galaxy did.